Welcome to Tech Intersect. I'm your host, Tanya Evans, and my life and work exist at the heart of law, business, and technology. Yeah, I've earned a few fancy titles and degrees over the years, but the bottom line is I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and lifelong learner, and I'm really excited that you've joined me on this journey. So what is Tech Intersect? Well, it's authentic, empowering conversations with really interesting guests who demystify complex topics to prepare you for the future, because your future is now. And it exists where law, business, and tech intersect. Get ready to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. In this episode of Tech Intersect, I welcome Vince McPhillip, founder of Knomad and former co-founder and head of community at Pi Network. He founded Knomad in 2018 to help people find more flexible and meaningful work. He was inspired to launch Knomad as a flash consultancy to pair students with cryptocurrency projects after reading an article titled Expert Crowdsourcing while he was in business school. And although he says it was really hard and challenging work, he focused on the promising signs of the magic that arises when people from different backgrounds come together to solve hard problems. Fast forward to the present moment. Now more people than ever are looking for greater autonomy, meaning, and financial reward in their work. Vince believes that every single person has inherent wisdom to share, irrespective of background or geographical borders. So Vince is building a global knowledge marketplace where people can trade expertise. By doing so, Knomad hopes to create alternative economies where nomads can turn their knowledge into wealth. Now, before we jump into the episode, please take a moment to follow this podcast and then like, share, and comment so that others who would benefit from the content can find it. Okay, it's time to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. In today's episode, I welcome Vince McPhillip, founder of Knomad, to the show. He launched Knomad in 2018 to help people find more flexible and meaningful work in this fast-paced digital economy. And through Knomad, Vince is building a global knowledge marketplace where people can trade expertise with the goal to create alternative economies where nomads can turn their knowledge into wealth. We're also new Twitter besties. I don't know if he knows I'm his bestie, but I am, at least in my Twitter head. That we were going to connect on a discovery call anyway. So I decided to share the magic of that discovery with you all, my favorite podcast listeners. We'll talk about all of that in a moment, but first, Vince, welcome.
Thank you so much, Professor Evans, and it's a real honor to be here with you and to be here with your audience as well. Hello, everyone.
Excellent. Well, I'm so excited because I love your work. You had me at anything related to the future of work and wealth. I'll ask you about your ideas about work and wealth and what that means to you a bit later. But go ahead and introduce yourself for those who aren't familiar with your background and whatever led you to this moment in time so that you created Knomad and the work that you do.
Well, yes, I can provide a brief introduction. So I'm an entrepreneur by trade. I'm actually originally from Trinidad and Tobago, so repping the Caribbean here in this entrepreneurial hustle. I studied political science at Yale in undergrad and did my MBA at Stanford. I would say that, my primary research interest, my primary entrepreneurial interest and true passion has been at the intersection of personal optimization, so helping people achieve and realize the greatest version of themselves, and collective intelligence, which is basically bringing people together in ways in which the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So I've applied this over the course of my career in building a series of what I call collectives. So these are organizations that bring a diverse group of people behind a shared goal. The last project, let's say, or collective that I was working on was one called Pi Network. This was a digital currency collective that where I served as co-founder and CEO, and that actually grew to 10 plus million people around the world over the course of 2 years. And now Knomad is my latest attempt to build a collective at a global scale. And again, one that, helps us thrive not just as individuals, but as communities.
I love that. And I really love the way that you just defined collective. We know in in crypto communities, the word community is often used, but that shared goal for something that is bigger than the individual parts is critical. And now I'm starting to see how that idea of community translated into collective is now connected for you in the idea of collective intelligence. So explain what collective intelligence is and what it means from your perspective, and certainly as it relates to Knomad.
Absolutely. So collective intelligence is a technical term that's actually been in use probably since the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first applications of collective intelligence was actually in juries, right? So the idea of bringing together a group of 10 or 12 people to make a quote unquote collective judgment about a case, right? And assuming that those 12 people would, through debate, through deliberation, become able to be, able to render a more fair verdict. Now, a more recent example is this guy gave a TED talk and he put, this like bull on the stage, and he basically asked a couple individuals in the crowd to guess what the weight of the bull was. And each one of them was really far off. But then he had everyone in the audience basically contribute their guess. And perhaps not surprisingly, the collective wisdom of that crowd actually gave a very, very accurate forecast of what this bull's weight was supposed to be. So that's an example of what they would call the wisdom of the crowds. So this is something that's been around and that each of us actually works with on a daily basis. I think what's particularly exciting these days is with the development of global information networks and the ability for people to deliberate and collaborate, not just in physical spaces, but literally across the entire world, really opens up the possibility of a shared intelligence, a collective intelligence. And I think that is what we're going to need if we're going to rise to the, what I call wicked problems of the world today.
Absolutely. And we're seeing more and more challenges to this idea of dogged individualism, which is actually, a construct that is completely contrary to the survival of humankind to this moment in time. And we are engaged in a real challenge. I was about to use the word battle, which conjures up the idea of this struggle, this fight. And perhaps it's well named, but I like to approach problem solving in the way that you just described, because it's the collective wisdom, the collective intelligence, the shared input that really always yields the best results for humans. And I imagine that is the precursor, the basis, the foundation upon which Knomad stands. So talk to us about what problems, challenges that Knomad is poised to solve.
Yeah. And, one thing I'll quickly say, in response and to build on what you were just saying is that, we have had, let's say, a few centuries of what I term enlightenment thinking. This is the kind of the rugged individualism, the power of the free market, what have you. And there's been an ongoing dialogue between, let's say, individualism and capitalism on one side and socialism and collectivism on the other side. And the one thing I will say is that I really do believe, and this will tie into what we're trying to do with Knomad, that in order to rise to the challenges that we're being confronted with today, we need to move from an either or framework to a both and, right? And how do we better empower individuals and really allow individuals to thrive in pursuit of their own personal passions while better aligning those individual incentives with collective and social goals, right? And so that's a lot of the work I see myself having done in the course of building these collectives and now trying to do with Knomad as well.
That's really, really powerful. And the dichotomies that have been set up really do humankind a disservice. I believe far more in the both and. Recently, I have started saying more two things can be true, two or more. I'm sure that you can have, and that speaks to the both and principle that you just articulated so well. And I'm sure that leads into this idea of turning knowledge into wealth, not as a matter of just the individual, although I do not have any problem with individual wealth, but how ultimately it's the shared knowledge, it is the collective effort that allows one to thrive while the many thrive as well. as opposed to the tragedy of the commons or something like that. So,
Yes.
right. Talk to me about this idea of turning knowledge into wealth and how that plays into the setup of the dichotomy and where you and Knomad intend to go.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I see a Knomad as trying to solve a problem both at the level of an individual and at the level of society, right? So for the people out there, the people that are listening in, there are many of us that are not spending our time in the way that we want to, right? We have our particular interests, we have our particular passions, but because of the kind of dictates of the current economic system, we spend a lot of our time following other people's passions. In this system in particular, following the passions of people that have the most amount of money.
Right. That part.
Right. Yeah. So that whole thing. Right. So, at the level of the individual nomad is really meant to tap into what I see as a common resource that everybody has, which is the ability to experience and develop knowledge and then share that knowledge.
Right.
And I believe that knowledge being what I think of as, essentially almost like an infinite resource can be a true source of wealth for individuals that is not dictated or dependent on or intermediated by big companies, the political swayings of the day. So that's on the individual level. Now, when you look at us as a society, and why I think it's so important that we also continually keep this lens in mind as well, is that we are having massive collective problems these days, societal level problems. Climate change, doesn't care what country you live in, right? Like we're all the smoke that was burning in California, which I was in San Francisco at that time, was clouding the skies in Washington, D.C. The smoke in Australia was clouding the skies in Argentina. There's flooding happening in Europe right now. There are fires happening in British Columbia and Canada. This is a massively wicked social problem.
Right.
I would say that, global inequality is another problem of this type. Racism is another problem of this type. These are the types of problems that individuals alone, as much as we live in a society that loves to cherish, like, the fountainhead, Rand-like individual,
right?
No one individual can solve these problems. And, the purpose of building this collective intelligence network in the form of Knomad is to allow us to assemble the ideas and the knowledge and the experiences from as wide a population of people as possible, so that we are actually able to rise to and surmount these challenges.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
I love that you chose the name Knomad for this purpose, because it says a number of different things to me. And if I saw that in isolation, one could easily say, oh, that's focused on an individual. But the idea of the nomad taps in for me, and you'll explain why you selected it, this idea of traveling, not putting, planting down your proverbial flag in any one place. Moving as easily as water, and all of the experiences that you can curate when you step outside of your geographic box, as if there ever really was one to exist.
Was one, yes.
In the first place, right?
Right.
I feel like the earth, one time before some type of massive earthquake, was all like together. It looks like it fits together to me. Clearly, I have no science background. At some point, it wasn't. But we used to be all together until we weren't. And maybe this exercise in coming back to our collective selves is what we are engaged in. That might be a story for another podcast. But I'm fascinated by the term nomad. And of course, I love a good trademark, so I love the way that you spell it. But talk to me about why you selected that word for the name of your company.
I think that Professor Evans, have hit on, many of the major themes. I think that I'll actually reference a book that I was reading recently called How to Do Nothing. But this book it's called How to Do Nothing, is actually a Trojan horse for how to do a lot, but in a different way than we have been approaching it. And, when I think about, obviously KNO, that is knowledge, and then Nomad is about wondering. And, at the end of this book, the author talks about, I believe her name is Jenny Odell, talks about a manifest dismantling as a counter to this, concept of manifest destiny, right?
Right.
And I think in a lot of ways, we have started to lose ourselves a bit in the unending push of technological progress, right? I think that there's been a type of what she describes as context collapse, a flattening of the world that has happened as we spend more and more of our times on our two-dimensional mobile screens, and less of our times paying attention to the physical, natural settings that we're in.
Right.
And so I think that, the nomad concept really is about kind of, you might almost call it a rewilding of sorts, right? It's kind of going back to older methods of social and economic organization where people could basically derive their own value and pay their way in through their unique skills.
Right.
I think another thing to your point about, nomad, a nomad may be an individual, but nomadic communities are tribal communities, right? So there's an inherent tribal interdependence that's also, suggested within the word, all within the context of, what I would term the new knowledge economy. So those are just a few of the themes that inspired it. And honestly, what I've found is that there's a lot of things that continue to emerge from this concept of nomad, and I'm sure there'll be more things that you and other people around the world will be able to kind of bring into this word as well.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of Tech Intersect. Our conversation will continue in a moment, but first, a word on an exciting opportunity.
There's a more cost-effective and time-efficient way to reach your leading-edge learning and earning goals, to put you ahead of the stiff competition in this fast-paced, tech-driven economy. You need skills, credentials, and a fast track to a competitive advantage. You need it now more than ever, and I can help. The Advantage Evans method puts you ahead of the curve with condensed, comprehensive online courses, curated content to leverage your current skills and expertise, live coaching, networking opportunities, and more. Upcoming courses include From Cash to Crypto to help you buy your first Bitcoin, and there are 2 ways to get your advantage. Advantage Evans Encore gives you maximum experience for your total competitive advantage and access for 1 year. It includes a live welcome and modules on terminology, buying and selling, exchanges, mining, earning crypto, trading and investing, and also several of the legal issues you need to know in order to be safe and secure as you enter this space. That includes tax compliance, how to plan for a Bitcoin estate, and securities laws to make sure you avoid any legal unforced errors. Now, Advantage Core gives you the essentials. It's a short course to give you what you want and the support you need to buy your first crypto in as little as 3 weeks, with access to the information and replays for 3 months. And if you're not quite ready for your Advantage and want a sneak peek to try before you buy, then register for a free masterclass where I share my Crypto 101 success checklist and cover current hot topics in crypto. So there truly is something for everyone, including you, to get in on the fast track and learn and earn in the digital economy. Visit AdvantageEvans.com to get started. That's AdvantageEvans.com.
And now, back to the conversation.
I appreciate that. We're really at this inflection point And I was remiss in not asking earlier what year you found your way to crypto, because I can, it says a lot about a person to identify the specific date, right? Whether it's 2009 Satoshi all the way up to, I don't know, 2017 to
Yes.
yesterday. So before I ask my question, what was your entry point into the crypto and blockchain space?
Yeah, so it's funny. I first encountered it in 2014 when I read a book called The End of Currency, I believe. And it basically, there was a brief chapter on digital money that was in that. And I thought it was intellectually curious. I'd been in the process of, building these collectives previously. And one of the biggest challenges I'd always faced is like, why is it that when people are trying to do collective good, they basically end up financially worse off? It's like, what's up with that?
Interesting.
What's up with that?
Right.
So I first encountered in 2014. I would say I started to get more serious about it in 2016 when that was the bull market before this bull market.
Right.
And I'm a very practical, and I really like to know what I'm getting my hands on. And so my instinct was I did an independent, body of research basically in between my summers while I was at the business school at Stanford. And then upon coming back, that gave me enough confidence to say, you know what, I think that there's something there. I founded a group called the Blockchain Collective at Stanford, which is another collective, right? But this time dedicated to helping people understand, what the real signal was in the cryptocurrency space.
Right.
And then, beyond that, I went on to, to co-found Pi Network to basically make what I saw as this promising technology more accessible to everyday people.
It's interesting. My entry point was in 2017, just at the end. I heard at some point about Bitcoin. I had a friend who was in a blockchain collective in a master's program at Syracuse. So it's funny that you mentioned it. And there were so many people studying, and it was around the time, or maybe just like right before, but around the time that people were starting to say blockchain, not Bitcoin. I suppose it has to do with the time that people use to build after, there's some type of bull run and then a major pullback and things start to settle back in. I wasn't sold on the idea of cryptocurrencies because I had practical Gen X questions like, where is it? Who is it? Why is it? And just being very, just highly risk adverse. But the intellectual and the academic and the educational entry point was one for me where I didn't want to teach the next wave of lawyers who was perhaps as disconnected as I was in the moment to technology that was so ubiquitous, and we just have to speak the language. So that was my entry point. I say all that to say our last topic was kind of getting to the point of why does collective effort often lead people to this idea of you're less well off, or you have to give up everything to serve the people, and it's another dichotomy, right? But two things can be true. Why can't it be both? And that you're able to be individually successful while also this idea of the rising tide that lifts all boats. On July 15th, I did a Cheddar TV segment that focused on the higher point was some type of response or reaction to Doge co-creator Jackson Palmer coming back on the scene briefly to say how horrible crypto had become. It's a shell of its former self. It too, it reflects some of the greatest ills that peer-to-peer cash was intended to avoid. And I don't know, I had like this image in my mind of Angela Bassett's character in Stella, how Stella got her groove back, and she throws up the match and burns shit down as she's walking away. I was like, oh no, are we burning everything away? Is it either or? I don't know if you have any reaction to that, but I think I recognize the concerns. I'm working very diligently to make sure that this current iteration of technology does not bring in all of the baggage and the bias of the previous thing, but any ideas about all or nothing in the space of the power and promise of crypto assets and blockchain?
Professor Evans. And that is the question. Yes, this is something I've thought a lot about. And, I almost need to just gather my thoughts here for a second,
Yes.
because you also just framed it so well. It's like, it is this tug between, again, individual incentives and collective good, right? And the attempt to yoke those two so that they are more in line. So, one of the biggest things that attracted me to Bitcoin was the idea that you could have individuals basically pursuing a mining reward, right, to try to basically win their piece of the Bitcoin pie, no pun intended.
Right.
And in the process, essentially build a global super network, right, that was capable of securing, at first hundreds of thousands, then millions, then billions, then hundreds of billions of dollars of value, right? This is a really great example of the, yoking of an individual incentive with a collective need or a collective goal. Environmental considerations, to the side for a second. Now, I think that the short of it is that it can be done. But in order to do it, we need to be brutally honest with ourselves about human nature and what makes us tick, right? And the fact of the matter is that when you introduce money, particularly, money that has the potential to appreciate a massive amount, or right, that holds some of that promise, money that your community in a sense is stewarding, right, and creating, it inevitably brings up greed, human greed. And there's a reason that avarice is one of the 7 deadly sins in the Christian tradition, right? It is a very, very powerful, motivator, and also, can be highly destructive. And so I think that the short answer is that I think we can do this. I think especially with thoughtful people like you and, thoughtful people like I'm sure that, some of your audience members that are listening in on this, we can actually harness this technology for the greater good. And at the same time, we just need to be brutally honest with ourselves about ourselves and, who we really are and what really motivates us. And I think it's only through a really critical view of, people and how they operate that we'll be able to design systems that truly are able to harness the good elements of these systems while not letting the potential kind of bad elements essentially overtake it and overrun it.
It's beautifully said, and I wholeheartedly agree. And it makes me wonder, because you spend all day, every day, and twice on Sunday thinking about these really complex challenges, but not just the challenges, the solution. When you imagine the world and this next future digital iteration, and specifically as it relates to the future of work and of wealth, since I love alliteration, what does the future of work look like? What does the future of wealth look like if we get this right?
If you're an engineer or a scientist, you love Formula One, you love cycling, you love learning about how new technologies are changing the world around us, then I thought you may want to listen into my new podcast, the Neil Ashton Podcast. We talk to leading engineers and scientists from around the world, hear about their life stories, hear about new technologies, and hopefully educate you and give you a better sense of how key things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, supercomputing are changing the world around us. If that sounds like it's something you might like, you should come and have a listen.
Well, a couple thoughts there. I think first, we need to start. I think a lot of people love to jump into the future of work and the future of wealth creation. I believe we need to start by understanding the history of work and the history of wealth creation, right? And, we are coming off of a long era of industrial production, right? An industrial economy, where goods, real physical goods, take a look around you right now, right? In your apartment. And I'll say this to the listeners as well. Just take a little look around you and look at how much stuff is around you right now, right? Like your desk, your computer, here I have an elliptical and, the chairs, right? Like, we've produced a lot of stuff over the course of the last couple centuries. And much of that was in the context of essentially bringing people together around in physical locations, let's call them factories, right? And, assembling things, right? A la the assembly line. And I think that we are working with the overhang of that model of work right now, right? When people started to get, basically they saw, Henry Ford comes up with the assembly line, and there's this guy named Taylorism, who's all about efficiency. And this is like the quote unquote birth of modern management science, which, by the way, has troubling ties to capitalism and slavery. But perhaps we can bring that, you know what I mean? That may be another episode where we can really discuss the roots of this. And so when you look around us now and you look at, the fact that a majority of Americans now are looking to quit their jobs, and, people are quitting in droves, it's the big, the great resignation. You have to look at that in the context of, the end of a long cycle of industrial means of organization and production. What I would argue is that we are now and have been transitioning into a knowledge-based economy, right? Where the majority of the value that's being created is no longer on a factory warehouse. It's actually being created within the minds and heads of individuals, and communities and collectives, right? And that, in my mind, just really completely changes the calculus, because all of a sudden, the winners are not the people that can assemble a group of people around, physical material and, extracting physical labor to produce physical goods. It's really about who's able to foster and cultivate and support good ideas. And I think that looks very differently from getting someone into an office from 9 to 5. And, the fact is that the knowledge economy, right? Like, inspiration can hit at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, right? An idea can arise in, this office that I'm sitting in Los Angeles, or in Tanzania, or in Germany, or in the Philippines, right? And so what we need to do is start to think about how we build a new type of work that actually best fosters the development and creation of ideas around the world. And I think that's the problem that we're trying to work on, is basically transitioning from this, industrial to knowledge-based economy.
It's really, really powerful. I see the early impact of exactly what you've described on traditional education. And I have been beating the drum for several years, and this might be, highly controversial as a tenured professor. And, tenure for a Black woman is not promised, so I'm not hating on my tenure. But what I realize is there are so many global companies who figured this out and transitioned to remote optional, transitioned to 4-year degree optional, right? And we'll teach you everything you know. We're focused on knowledge, skills, credentials, modularizing education to get the bits and bytes, pun intended, of what you need in order to be successful in this new economy. And it's all coming together and converging. And the pressure point, the inflection point, maybe the catalyst will be this global pandemic as well, that has forced traditional legacy systems who had decades to change direction and chose not to until they had to. On one day, they said, everybody into the office. On the next day, everybody out of the office, right? And it's like, we all couldn't work from home. Okay, great, cool.
Yeah. Right? I see the, so I think that this trend was happening underneath the surface, right? Because a lot of people think that COVID caused, right, this, and I take a little bit of a different view. I think this was already happening, but yeah, I see COVID as basically like it was the Morpheus like red pill, where everybody all of a sudden was like, wait a second, you mean like we can be producing this value like from the comfort of our homes? Like, wait, why are we?
Earth is flat. Crazy talk. Run. Right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the factory managers are all up in arms right now, right? And they're just like, oh my God, we gotta, we need you to clock in. What are you talking about? And all of us are just like looking at our friends that are making like seemingly doing just fine, just making their money on the internet and like living their kind of like best life. And
Absolutely.
I think there are a lot of people that are scratching their heads right now, let's say.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I could keep you here all day. I'm choosing not to for the good of the collective and also the individual who has other things to do, that being you. But thank you so much for joining me for this first of what I hope are many conversations about some really thoughtful and important issues that we can collectively work on together. I want you to let people know, I certainly will share it in the show notes, but let people know the best way to connect with you and learn more about your work.
Oh, absolutely. And, first of all, I just want to say how much I really enjoyed this conversation and connecting with you, Professor Evans. It's been a real joy. And yeah, in terms of getting in touch with me, I am on Twitter. So you can find me at Vince, Vince, McP, MCP. You can also go to Knomad, Knomad.io. We have a wait list for Nomads right now where people can, sign up and join this next phase of the knowledge economy. But again, it's just been so fun having this conversation and I hope we can connect again soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for reminding us of the power of the individual to align with other individuals to collectively change the world. So thank you for the work that you do. Wow, I really learned a lot in this engaging and really authentic conversation with Vince. I hope you did too. We covered what collective intelligence is, the historical challenges of an aging and increasingly defunct industrial economy, and how Knomad is poised to address them. And Vince explained the idea of turning knowledge into wealth and how that connects to and can empower marginalized communities to achieve economic empowerment and wealth. I asked Vince what the future of work and wealth meant to him. Now, think about that answer for yourself. What does the future of work and wealth mean to you? And are you fully prepared? Because the future you enjoy tomorrow is the one you create today. Before we sign off, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this episode and this podcast with your networks. Follow me on social media and let me know what topics you'd like to hear more of and who you want to hear from. All right, that's all for this episode. Until next time, continue to shine.
Stay in touch with host Tanya Evans via your favorite social media. On Twitter at Tech Intersect and on Instagram via the handle Tech Intersect. This podcast has been produced by Stephanie Renee for Soul Sanctuary Incorporated.